Hey guys, tonight we begin with the rowdy, smoky and slightly sticky world of the medieval tavern, the unsung heart of every town, the unofficial news centre, and the only place where a knight, a farmer and a bard could all get equally drunk and equally robbed. It wasn't just a place to drink, it was a place where danger, laughter and disease mingled freely beneath a thatched roof. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've trudged through a muddy street that smells like a blend of horse, smoke, and questionable soup. It's raining, of course, or just finished, so everything's slick, including your only pair of shoes. You're tired, you're hungry, and you've nearly been run over by a cart full of turnips twice. You need a drink. So how do you find a tavern in a medieval town? There are no glowing signs, no Yelp reviews, and certainly no GPS. What you do have are your ears. Just follow the noise. Somewhere, past the blacksmith's forge and the fishmonger yelling about his fresh river eels, is a chorus of laughter, shouting, and someone aggressively singing about a goose. And there it is. A crooked wooden building, leaning slightly as if even the architecture has had one too many. Hanging above the door is a wooden sign, barely legible, with a crude painting of... Is that a barrel? Or a bear? Or maybe both? Either way, this is it. Welcome to the tavern. The front step is slick with ale, and as you push open the heavy, iron-hinged door, it lets out a creak so long and dramatic it might qualify as its own form of entertainment. Instantly, warm air and the rich perfume of smoke, wet wool, stale beer, and mystery meat hit your face like a drunken handshake. You've made it. Inside, the ceiling is low enough to make tall men duck and drunk men bump their heads. The floor is dirt. Not metaphorically, literally, though someone's laid down straw in an attempt to pretend it's cleaner. It isn't. There are no private booths, no waiters with menus, and no such thing as quiet conversation. This is a medieval tavern, and it only comes in two settings: rowdy and closed due to fire. You spot an open seat at a lopsided bench near the hearth, but it's wet. With what, you don't ask. Someone nearby is arguing about a stolen chicken. Another is passed out with a ladle still in his hand. A one-eyed dog gnaws on a bone under a table like he pays rent there. And this, friend, is just the entrance. You've only just arrived, and already it smells like a night to remember, or forget. As the heavy tavern door slams shut behind you, the darkness wraps around your senses like a damp wool blanket, warm, uncomfortable, and slightly suspicious. Your eyes adjust slowly. Candlelight flickers against soot-stained walls, casting dancing shadows that make even the chairs look like they might pick a fight. The hearth blazes in the far corner, doubling as both heating and open-flame hazard. Smoke drifts lazily in the air, not quite escaping through the chimney that might be stuffed with a dead crow. But what hits you hardest isn't the noise or the heat, it's the smell. A medieval tavern's scent is less aromatic and more emotional trauma. The top notes are ale, warm, sour, and splashed liberally across every surface. Beneath that, sweat, years of it, human, horse, and maybe something mythical. Add a hint of mouldy bread, wet straw, and a whisper of boiled onions, and you have a blend no perfumer has dared bottle. The tables are carved with years of initials, crude drawings and knife scars. They wobble with a kind of stubborn pride. The benches creak under the weight of muddy boots, thick cloaks and questionable decisions. The floor? Dirt as promised, but layered with straw meant to soak up spills, spit, and the occasional unconscious customer. You step carefully. One wrong move and your foot sinks into something with a texture best left undescribed. The crowd is a living, breathing organism. Loud laughter erupts in one corner, while two men argue about the price of a pig in another. A woman slams a mug down hard enough to spill half her drink, and no one even flinches. A man at the next table stares at you with the dazed look of someone who's either thinking very deeply or forgetting how chairs work. Someone nearby sneezes. The entire left side of the room collectively leans away. And still, despite the overwhelming assault on your modern sensibilities, there's something welcoming here. The tavern is alive. It's rough, raw, and completely unfiltered. The medieval version of a community hub, minus the hygiene, and with 400% more shouting. You find your seat. It's a bit damp. It's probably cursed. But for now, it's yours. At first glance, the tavern's layout looks like someone arranged the furniture during an earthquake, and then just decided to leave it that way. There's no blueprint, no bar area, no cozy booths in the back. Just a sprawling, uneven spillage of tables, benches, barrels, and the occasional wooden crate being passed off as a seat. Everything is too close together or too far apart, depending on how drunk you are. The hearth is the only real centerpiece, a big open fire roaring against one wall, doing its best to provide warmth, light, and a healthy dose of indoor smoke inhalation. Around it, people crowd in for comfort, like moths with mugs. Those with the best seats hog the warmth. Those without? Well, that's what ale is for. The bar, if you can call it that, is usually just a thick wooden plank resting across two barrels, sagging under the weight of jugs, mugs, and elbows. Behind it stands the tavern keeper, multitasking between pouring drinks, yelling orders, and giving that one guy in the corner the death stare of, "You still haven't paid for last Tuesday." There are no menus. You ask what's available and brace yourself. The answer is usually ale or shut up and wait. A narrow staircase, possibly original, definitely splintery, leads to the upstairs rooms. If you squint, you can see a boot hanging from one of the railing posts. No one's entirely sure if it's decorative or a warning. Some taverns have a back room. It might be for storage. It might be for illegal gambling. Or it might be where the last person who insulted the barmaid was taken, never to be seen again. It's best not to ask. The walls are stained with candle soot, the windows are covered with greasy cloth or animal hide, and every surface has been thoroughly polished by the elbows, boots, and spilled drinks of generations past. And maybe a chicken. Somehow, despite the chaos, or because of it, it works. Everyone knows where to go, how to sit, when to shout, and when to duck. It's not organised, but it is alive. Every medieval tavern has a ruler, and it's not the local lord or the tax collector. It's the tavern keeper. They may not wear a crown, but don't be fooled. This person runs the show. Equal parts chef, server, accountant, babysitter, and executioner of barroom justice. The tavern keeper is a one-person institution, and they take no nonsense. If it's a man, he's likely built like a barrel with arms, grizzled, grumpy, and carved from cured meat and bad decisions. If it's a woman, and often it is, she's sharper than a blacksmith's file, and can silence a room with a single look. Either way, they've seen everything, heard worse, and cleaned blood out of straw before breakfast. They greet regulars with a nod, strangers with suspicion, and troublemakers with a tankard to the head. Behind the bar, they keep mental tabs on who's paid, who owes, and who's had 3 too many. And they do it all without writing anything down. Because medieval literacy might be rare, but tavern memory is terrifying. The tavern keeper sets the tone. If they're in a good mood, the place hums. If they're in a bad mood, you'd better drink fast and keep your jokes to yourself. They're the referee in every argument, the judge in every cheating scandal, and the first to grab a club when a fight breaks out. You do not mess with the tavern keeper. They also know everything. Who's in debt, who's having an affair, who arrived in town under a false name. Need information? Bribe the barkeep? Need protection? Sit near them? Need a favour? Better hope you didn't break a mug last week. Some have a helper, a son, daughter, spouse, or orphan they sort of adopted, and now make carry barrels twice their weight. These assistants run drinks, mop floors, and try not to spill anything or get stepped on by drunks. So while the tavern may feel like chaos to you, it's actually a very delicate ecosystem. And in the centre, commanding it all like a storm god in an apron, stands the one person keeping the ale flowing and the roof from collapsing into a riot, the tavern keeper. So, you finally settle onto a creaky bench, dodging elbows and spilled stew. Your throat's dry, your boots are damp, and it's time for the main event, the drink. But don't expect a wine list or a polished mug. This is a medieval tavern. Your choices are limited, lukewarm, and possibly life-threatening. Let's start with the classic, ale. Unfiltered, unpasteurized, and usually brewed in the back room where the dog sleeps. It's thick, cloudy, and often comes with floaties, bits of grain, yeast, or possibly a chunk of the previous customer's moustache. It's not cold because there's no ice. And you don't ask how long it's been sitting in the barrel. You just drink and hope. Next up, mead, honey wine. Sounds fancy, right? In reality, it's sweet, strong, and occasionally explosive. If the tavern keeper made it themselves, it might be delicious, or it might taste like regret and bee venom. It's usually served to nobles, wedding guests, or that one bard who insists on being paid in gold or mead. Then there's cider, made from apples that were either freshly picked or dropped on the ground 3 weeks ago. Sharp, tangy, and served in cracked mugs that may double as soup bowls by morning. It's the drink of choice in orchard-rich regions, or for those who want something just alcoholic enough to forget the smell of the man sitting beside them. Wine? Technically, yes. But unless you're in southern Europe or the nobilities in town, it's likely watered down, soured, and served with a side of sarcasm. Good wine is reserved for lords, bishops, and the merchant who just sold 12 crates of salt. And water? That's a bold choice, because half the time it's teeming with invisible death. Boiling costs fuel, and clean wells are rare. That's why even children drink ale. It's not about the buzz, it's about not dying of dysentery before age 8. No one's measuring shots or crafting cocktails here. You drink from mugs made of wood, clay, or tin. Some still have last night's stew in them. You raise your mug, sniff it, and sip. It's warm, it's bitter, and somehow, it's perfect. Because in the medieval tavern, if it's wet and won't kill you immediately, it's a fine vintage. So you've survived the drink? Barely. Now your stomach growls, reminding you that you haven't eaten since sunrise, and your last meal was mostly barley and sadness. Time to eat. But don't get excited. There's no menu, no waiter, and absolutely no one asking if you have any dietary restrictions. You don't order food in a medieval tavern. You ask what's left, then hope it's hot and only vaguely mysterious. The star of the tavern table is usually pottage, a thick stew made from whatever grains, vegetables, and questionable proteins were lying around that day. It's been cooking in the same pot since Monday, and it's now Thursday. New ingredients are added daily. Nothing is removed. It's less of a meal and more of a culinary time capsule. If meat is involved, congratulations. It's probably rabbit, pigeon, or the unlucky chicken who wandered too close to the fire. If it's game meat, it might be delicious. Or it might be aged past reason and seasoned with desperation. Your bowl is made of wood or clay. Your spoon? Either your own or your fingers. Most people carry their own knife, so eating is a BYO cutlery affair. And don't expect napkins, just the sleeve of your tunic or a shared rag that's seen things it'll never forget. Bread is also on offer. It's tough, dark, and heavy, more a weapon than a food. If it's soft, it was baked today. If it's hard, it was baked last week. Either way, it pairs well with cheese that smells like an old boot and has started developing its own personality. Sometimes they're salted fish, sometimes pickled eggs. Occasionally you'll find a tavern offering a special, which is just a fancier way of saying, we had too much of this lying around. Flavour, optional, texture, unpredictable. Still, in the flickering firelight, with noise all around and the warmth of food in your hands, it's not bad. It's filling. It's hot. And if you don't think too hard about what's floating in your bowl, it might even be comforting. You're not here for fine dining. You're here to eat like a survivor. Once you've found your seat, ideally one without a knife stuck in it, you start to notice the real entertainment, the people. A medieval tavern is the original social media feed, loud, chaotic, half-true, and fully committed to oversharing. To your left, there's a red-faced farmer, already deep into his fourth ale, retelling the same story about his cow giving birth sideways. He slaps your shoulder mid-sentence like you're a lifelong friend, or a good replacement for the pig he usually drinks with. At the far end of the room, a hooded stranger sits in shadows, nursing a drink slowly. He could be a runaway monk, or a bandit, or just really bad at eye contact. Either way, you're not making small talk with him unless you want to disappear behind the stables. Near the hearth, a soldier in battered armour is regaling a group with tales of battle. His story involves dragons, Frenchmen, and a talking sword. It's definitely false, no one cares. His tankard is full, and his audience is laughing. There's a merchant, loud and sweaty, shouting prices for grain that no one asked for. He pulls gold coins from his pouch like a man begging to be robbed by midnight. A pair of locals play dice on a warped table, their expressions intense. One of them clearly cheats. The other knows and lets it happen, probably saving the fight for when his ale runs out. A bard strums in the corner, voice cracking on the high notes of a love song that sounds suspiciously like one he just made up. No one minds. He's wearing pants, and he's in tune. That's already better than last night's guy. Women wander through the crowd, some tavern staff, others working their own business. They're sharp-eyed, confident, and absolutely not to be trifled with. They'll flirt, laugh, or knock your teeth in depending on your tone. Children occasionally dart between legs, swiping leftover bread or coin. No one stops them. It's just part of the rhythm. Everyone is watching, drinking, plotting, and pretending not to notice the man slumped under the table. This tavern isn't just a place to eat and drink. It's a living, breathing performance. And tonight, you're part of the cast. Forget lutes and ballads for a moment. The real soundtrack of a medieval tavern isn't a song, it's a symphony of chaos. It begins with the clink of mugs, dozens of them slamming against wood in celebration, negotiation, or drunken misfire. Some clang cheerfully, others shatter completely. Both are met with cheers. Then comes the laughter. Big, loud, belly-deep laughter that sounds like it escaped from a wild boar. Most of it makes no sense. A farmer chuckles at his own joke about hay. A knight giggles at the word pottage. A monk wheezes uncontrollably every time someone says duck. You learn quickly not to ask. Voices layer over one another, each louder than the last, fighting for dominance like roosters in a coop. There's arguing, storytelling, shouting about taxes, and at least one person misquoting scripture to win a bet. The bartender yells orders while swatting flies. A barmaid shouts at a man who tried to grab her, and someone keeps repeating, "Another round," like a battle cry. And in the corner, the bard. With a half-tuned lute and 3 missing strings, he plays the same 4 chords on loop, occasionally bursting into verses about lost love, found chickens, or noblemen who wore their pants backwards. No one really listens, unless he starts singing about someone in the room, at which point things get very entertaining or very dangerous. Someone spills something. Someone burps loud enough to make the rafters tremble. Someone else falls off a bench and keeps talking from the floor like it's intentional. In the background, dogs bark, a goat bleats. Why is there a goat? And chairs scrape across dirt like thunderclaps in a wooden cavern. It's not peaceful, but it's oddly rhythmic. Occasionally the room goes quiet. Not by choice, just a sudden lull. It lasts exactly 3 seconds. Then someone farts heroically, and the music starts again. This isn't background noise. This is the tavern's heartbeat, raw, rowdy, and relentlessly alive. If you listen closely enough, it starts to make sense. A kind of harmony born from disorder. And like the rest of the tavern, it only gets louder the longer you stay. Once the ale starts flowing and the stew starts settling, the tavern transforms. It's no longer just a place to eat and drink. It becomes a medieval casino, minus the velvet ropes and with way more yelling. Gambling is the sport of the evening, and everyone plays, from weathered soldiers to barefoot boys with borrowed dice. There's no dealer, no pit boss, no regulation, just a cracked wooden table, a handful of copper coins, and the vague promise that someone's about to lose their dignity. Dice are the game of choice, carved from bone, wood, or whatever was lying around. They clatter across tabletops like rolling thunder, each toss followed by a mix of cheers, groans, and accusations of witchcraft. No one trusts the dice. Everyone uses them. Then there are cards, if you're in a more cultured part of town. Thick, hand-painted, worn to the edges, and always missing one or two. The rules shift based on who explains them. Sometimes you're trying to get the highest number. Other times you're matching symbols or just making it up as you go. It's like poker, but with more slapping. Wagers range from money to mugs to livestock. Yes, someone once bet a goat. Someone else bet their boots. And someone else bet their own freedom for the night. Spoiler, he lost. The regulars are slick. They shuffle quickly, roll slowly, and smile a little too wide. Cheating? Of course. It's half the fun. A hidden die here, a marked card there, a mysterious cough when the lucky player leans in. If you win big, you buy a round or risk getting jumped. If you lose badly, you smile, pretend you meant to, and slowly push your chair back toward the door. Side games erupt too. Arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the ever-popular who can drink the most without falling over. The winner earns applause. The loser earns a night under the table and a headache that lasts until next market day. But even when the rules are unclear and the stakes are absurd, the energy is addictive. Because in a medieval tavern, luck isn't just a game, it's a gamble with your purse, your pride, and possibly your pants. As the night deepens and the tavern fills with warmth and humidity, a new kind of performance takes the floor. One made of words, music, and confident nonsense. This is story time, medieval style. A bard clears his throat in the corner, gently plucking at a half-tuned lute, the strings squeaking like old boots. He's missing a few teeth, but not a bit of confidence. With a dramatic flourish, he launches into a ballad of heartbreak and heroism. Something about a knight who fell in love with a mermaid and drowned nobly while reciting poetry. No one believes him. Everyone listens anyway. That's how it works here. Truth is optional. Entertainment is everything. Around the tables, others join in. Not bards, just patrons with ale-fueled bravery and a tale to tell. One man swears he once wrestled a bear and lived to drink about it. Another claims he saw a witch turn a cow into a goat. A third insists he's related to Charlemagne on his mother's cousin's side. Everyone's story begins with, "You won't believe this, but..." And they're right. We don't. But we want to. Boasts become ballads. Mishaps become myths. Someone tells a joke so bad it circles back to being good. Someone else recites a poem, likely plagiarized from a monk's scroll. The room claps, hoots, or throws bread, depending on the quality or quantity of the performance. If you're lucky, a skald or minstrel might be passing through. Professionals who travel from town to town, exchanging music for coins, meals, and occasionally a place to sleep indoors. Their songs are polished, their tales long, and their ability to rile up a crowd? Dangerous. But even they know the golden rule of tavern tales. Never let facts ruin a good story. In this smoke-filled room, with the fire crackling and the mugs sloshing, storytelling isn't just entertainment. It's tradition. It's connection. It's how you make friends, enemies, and the occasional lifelong drinking partner. By midnight, Half the tavern is reenacting the story of the one-legged knight who fought off 6 highwaymen with a ladle. You laugh, you cheer, you forget it's all made up. Because in a medieval tavern, every liar is a legend, if the story's good enough. As the night deepens and the ale keeps flowing, something changes in the air, a kind of boozy boldness. The bard is halfway through his 3rd song about unfaithful shepherdesses, and suddenly, everyone's feeling romantic. Welcome to medieval flirting. Subtlety has left the building. It starts with eye contact, or at least one eye, slightly squinting through a mead-induced haze. A man with 2 remaining teeth leans across a bench and slurs, "Milady, your beauty burns brighter than the hearth." She responds by hurling a bread crust at his forehead. The room cheers. Others try their luck more gently, offering refilled mugs, clumsy compliments, or offers to help carry a bowl of stew so it doesn't spill. Spoiler, it still spills. If you're a woman in the tavern, staff, guest, or travelling merchant, you're likely used to fending off at least 3 would-be poets, 2 arm wrestlers, and 1 man who tries to impress you by balancing a knife on his nose. Sometimes it works. Usually, it ends with a black eye or an empty purse. For those actually seeking companionship, taverns offer more than just flirting. Courtesans work the room with practiced ease, knowing who has coin, who has charm, and who will pass out before making it to the stairs. Transactions are discreet, but the implications are loud. Jealous lovers? Oh yes. Nothing sparks a tavern fight faster than a stolen glance, a wandering hand, or a husband catching his wife laughing a little too hard at the bard's joke about bishops. Tables are overturned, mugs are weaponized, a bench gets broken in half, again. And yet, somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, genuine sparks fly. A shy baker's daughter and a travelling stonemason laugh over shared stew. 2 drunk farmers bond over a mutual hatred of turnips. A monk accidentally flirts with a nun. Love, or something like it, survives in even the rowdiest corners. Because in the medieval tavern, romance is equal parts charm, chance, and not falling face first into your bowl mid-sentence. You might win a heart, you might earn a slap. Either way, you're going to remember it, or at least hear about it the next morning. It was bound to happen. Maybe someone spilled a drink. Maybe someone accused someone else of cheating at dice. Maybe 2 people claimed the same bench and neither backed down. Or maybe someone said something about someone else's mother, goat or soup. Doesn't really matter. Suddenly it's on. The tavern, once a blur of music and mugs, turns on a dime. A stool flies. A tankard crashes to the floor. Someone yells, "Hold my bread!" and launches themselves over a bench with all the grace of a drunk catapult. No one is surprised. In fact, most people don't even stop drinking. A bar fight in the Middle Ages isn't rare, it's expected. It's practically a feature. And while it sounds terrifying, it's usually more comedic than deadly. People swing wildly, miss, trip, and land in someone's dinner. Hair is pulled, beards are grabbed, shirts are torn. The tavern keeper roars like a battlefield general while holding a ladle in one hand and a club in the other. Occasionally someone joins the fight with no idea why. They just saw action and leapt in, fists first. Others place informal bets, cheer, or slide their mugs out of splash range. Weapons? Rare. Most folks know better. Pulling a blade in a tavern can turn a casual brawl into a full-blown tavern legend, and no one wants to be banned from the only place that serves hot food and warm ale. Eventually, someone hits the floor and stays there. Someone else stumbles into a wall and decides that's as good a place as any to sit and rethink their life. The fight burns out like a tavern candle, suddenly and without ceremony. And here's the strange part. Once it's over, it's over. The fighters are separated, mugs are refilled, someone starts a song, and within 10 minutes, everyone is laughing again, including the guy with the bleeding nose. No grudges, no lawsuits, just bruises, stories, and maybe a new nickname like One-Eyed Arnold or Benchbreaker Bill. Because in a medieval tavern, a good fight, is just part of a good night. Messy, ridiculous, and weirdly bonding. And if no one gets hurt too badly, it's just another round of entertainment. So the brawl's over, the bard has passed out mid-ballad, and your stomach is full of mystery stew and slightly fermented cider. It's time to sleep, or at least attempt to. But don't expect a feather bed and lavender-scented linens. This is a medieval tavern, not a spa. If the tavern offers lodging, it's likely a creaky staircase away. Upstairs, past slanted floors and beams low enough to test your skull's durability. The rooms are small, cold, and absolutely shared. Privacy doesn't exist. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers, some snoring like church bells, others dreaming loudly in languages you've never heard. Beds? Technically. Most are straw-stuffed mattresses, thin, lumpy, and crawling with what medieval folks fondly called companions. You lay down fully clothed, boots on, dagger under your pillow, not for comfort but for defensive strategy. Blankets are shared, so are smells. And if someone had garlic earlier, someone always has garlic, it will become an intimate part of your dreams. If you're too poor, or too drunk, for a room, you sleep downstairs, on a bench, under a table, or just in a corner by the hearth, curled up next to a dog that may or may not belong to the tavern. You'll be stepped on, probably sneezed on, and maybe used as a footrest. The tavern never really quiets. Even after the last mug is drained and the last fight patched up, there's always someone muttering in their sleep, a log popping in the fire, or a distant fart echoing through the rafters. And yet, somehow, you drift off. It's not comfortable. It's not clean, but it's safe enough. The fire keeps the worst of the cold away. The tavern keeper keeps watch with one eye open and a club in hand. And the noise becomes its own kind of lullaby. Familiar, human, alive. You'll wake with a sore neck, a dry mouth, and a questionably acquired bruise. But for a few hours, you sleep, in the company of travellers, rogues, farmers, and fools. No kings, no silence, just snoring, straw, and the faint hope your boots are still there come morning. Dawn creeps in like an uninvited guest, sliding pale light through the cracks in the shutters and poking at your eyelids with merciless persistence. The tavern has changed overnight, not quieter exactly, but quieter in a defeated sort of way. You open one eye. Someone's boot is on your chest. Someone else is mumbling in their sleep about sheep taxes. The bard is snoring under a table, clutching his lute like a lover. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at yesterday's bread crusts. No one questions where it came from. The fire has died down, leaving the room cold and smoky. A few patrons begin to stir, groaning like wounded warriors from battles fought entirely inside their own skulls. One man sits up, looks around, and lies back down. Having decided today isn't worth it. The tavern keeper is already up, because of course they are. Clattering mugs, sweeping straw into fresh piles, reheating something in a pot that smells both inviting and slightly vengeful. They shoot a look at the bodies on the floor, then bang a ladle against a mug like a morning bell from hell. Up or out? That's your wake-up call. There's no breakfast buffet. If you're lucky, there's more pottage, now even thicker than last night. Bread is rewarmed, ale is watered down, and no one has the strength to complain. Some patrons just dunk their heads in a barrel of rainwater outside and call it clean living. You check your pouch. 2 coins and a button. Better than expected. Your boots? Still here. One of them has a bite mark, but they're yours. A win. A few new faces trickle in. Early risers, travellers, workers in need of a drink before dealing with livestock, taxes, or worse, neighbours. The tavern begins to stir again, like a beast slowly waking. Someone starts retelling a story from last night. It's already changed, of course. Now there were 2 fights, and the bard's song summoned a ghost. Everyone nods like it's gospel. The night was chaos. The morning is groggy, grimy, and full of regret. And yet, you smile. Because somehow, you survived it. By now, You've felt the sweat, the smoke, the sticky ale under your boots. You've survived the shouting, the flirting, the pottage, and possibly a flying bench. And through all that, one thing becomes clear. The medieval tavern wasn't just a drinking hole, it was the beating heart of the community. In a world with no phones, no newspapers, no social networks, the tavern was where news travelled. A merchant from the coast could share gossip from a foreign port. A soldier could describe the war from the front. A bard could sing songs that stitched people together, even if the lyrics changed every night. This was a place for connection. Farmers drank beside craftsmen. Pilgrims shared bread with thieves. Strangers became friends, or at least drinking buddies, before the second round. Here, social classes blurred, rumours were born, alliances were made, and grudges were buried, or fuelled further, depending on how the dice rolled. The tavern was also where business happened. Deals made, contracts shaken over splinters and spilled cider. It was a court, a confessional, and a theatre stage all at once. You could find a job, lose your purse, get married, or start a feud in a single evening. And it offered something else too. Something you couldn't buy at the market or pray for in a chapel. Relief. From the cold. From the work. From the endless seriousness of surviving medieval life. For a few hours you could sit near a fire, hear a bad joke, sing a worse song, and forget, just briefly, how hard the outside world was. Even if the ale was warm, the bed was itchy, and the food had more bones than broth. The tavern gave you a sense of being alive, among the living, and in an age where everything from disease to war to a sharp winter could take you without warning, that was no small thing. So when you stepped into a medieval tavern, you weren't just buying a drink. You were buying belonging, story, and maybe, if the floor wasn't too crowded, a place to sleep where the fire still burned. Because long before cafes and pubs and coffee houses, there was the tavern. Loud, dirty, honest, and absolutely unforgettable. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalised in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze frozen in serene confidence, Nefertiti was a woman cloaked in mystery. Her name means, "the beautiful one has come," but no one knows exactly where she came from. Some believe she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian official named Ai, possibly even the sister of Akhenaten. Others argue she was a foreign princess, sent to Egypt in a marriage alliance. Her origins are debated, but her influence is undeniable. Nefertiti appears in the historical record like lightning, sudden, brilliant, and transformative. She enters Akhenaten's life not as a passive queen, but as an equal partner in a reign that would shake Egypt's religious and cultural foundations. Together, they would dismantle centuries of tradition, discard the pantheon of gods, and elevate the sun disk Aten as the one true deity. It was a radical, near-heretical move, and Nefertiti wasn't just watching from the throne. She was leading ceremonies, making offerings, even depicted in art-smiting enemies, a role typically reserved for male pharaohs. Unlike other queens who were relegated to the background, Nefertiti was ever present. She appears in more artwork from the period than even Akhenaten himself. In these depictions, she isn't cloaked in subservience. She stands tall, sometimes larger than life, holding power quite literally in her hands. And in a society where pharaohs were divine, her proximity to Akhenaten, both spiritually and politically, suggested something more. Perhaps she wasn't just queen. Perhaps she was co-ruler. But this rise wasn't without tension. Egypt was not ready for the upheaval. The old priesthood resented the loss of their gods and temples. The capital moved to a new city, Akhetaten, today known as Amarna, cutting ties with the old ways. And through it all, Nefertiti was there, her figure etched into stone walls, her name sung in hymns to the sun. Yet, for all her visibility in life, her death is a complete vanishing act. No tomb, no body, no confirmed end. Just silence. It's as if history, after showcasing her brilliance, suddenly chose to look away. And that, perhaps, is where her legend truly begins. To understand Nefertiti's rise, you must first meet the man who changed everything, Pharaoh Akhenaten. He wasn't born with that name. He was originally Amenhotep IV, a prince in line with a 1,000-year legacy of gods and tradition. But something shifted inside him. Some call it divine inspiration, others say madness. When he became king, he turned his back on the mighty god Amun and declared a new truth. There was only one god worth worshipping, the sun itself, the Aten. This wasn't just a religious shift. It was an earthquake that cracked the bedrock of Egyptian civilization. Imagine a society built around temples, priests, and rituals being told overnight that their gods were false, their worship obsolete. Akhenaten didn't just preach monotheism, he enforced it. The temples of Amun were shut down. His name was chiseled off monuments. Statues were smashed. Entire cities were abandoned. In their place, Akhenaten built something new. Akhetaten, a city dedicated solely to Aten, where the sun would rise directly between the cliffs and bathe the city in sacred light. And through it all, Nefertiti stood at his side, not as a silent consort, but as a full participant. In the reliefs of the period, she's shown worshipping Aten with the same reverence as Akhenaten. Their daughters are often depicted with them, heads tilted toward the radiant sun. It was a family portrait unlike anything in Egyptian art before or since. Even the style of the art changed, no longer stiff and formal, but loose, exaggerated, sometimes even intimate. The king and queen kissing, playing with their children, praying in soft robes beneath the sun. Nefertiti was everywhere in this new world. At times, she even overshadowed her husband. Some historians believe she held real political power, maybe even acted as co-regent. There are inscriptions that refer to her as Neferneferuaten, a name some believe she used when she began ruling in her own right. It's unclear if Akhenaten shared the throne out of love, strategy, or necessity, but it was clear. Without Nefertiti, this revolution may not have held together as long as it did. But revolutions are fragile. The gods don't take kindly to being replaced. And the people? They were quietly watching, waiting for the old order to return. By the height of her influence, Nefertiti had become more than a queen. She had become an icon, not just of beauty, but of divine femininity and royal power. Egypt had seen great queens before, Ahmose Nefertari, Hatshepsut, but Nefertiti's presence felt different. She wasn't ruling from the shadows or taking power through war. She was reshaping the spiritual and cultural fabric of Egypt beside her husband, in real time, as a living goddess. She bore Akhenaten 6 daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesenpaten, and others, all of whom were frequently depicted in family scenes beneath the rays of Aten. Curiously, no sons were ever confirmed. In a kingdom obsessed with lineage, this was both a political problem and a historical mystery. Was it fate, or was something else at play? Some suggest Akhenaten may have had sons with other wives, or even, more controversially, with Nefertiti herself, fueling modern speculation and uncomfortable theories that range from the speculative to the salacious. What is certain is that motherhood was central to her image. In art, Nefertiti is portrayed cradling her children, their tiny arms reaching up to touch her cheeks. These aren't stiff, cold statues. These are living moments, carved in stone, intimate, emotional, radiant. In an age where pharaohs were often distant gods, Nefertiti's portrayal as a nurturing mother softened the divine, making it human. Yet there was another side to her iconography, one far more powerful. In multiple depictions, Nefertiti wears the blue crown usually reserved for male rulers. She is shown smiting enemies, riding chariots, making offerings without Akhenaten beside her. These were not symbolic gestures. This was a queen performing the sacred duties of a king. It suggests a quiet but radical truth. Nefertiti may have been preparing for something more than partnership. she may have been preparing to rule. Whispers in history suggest that after Akhenaten's health began to decline, possibly due to genetic disorders or stress, Nefertiti took on more governing responsibility. But this is where the record starts to fade. In the final years of Akhenaten's reign, she vanishes from the public eye. No fanfare, no funeral inscriptions, no confirmed burial. Did she die young? Did she fall from power? Or was she about to become something even greater than a queen? Something history tried and failed to erase? One day, Nefertiti was everywhere, etched into walls, praised in hymns, ruling alongside a revolutionary pharaoh. And then, like a breath in the desert wind, she vanished. No ancient Egyptian queen had ever been so visible. Yet around year 12 of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, the records grow eerily silent. Her name disappears from the inscriptions. Her image fades from the art. No tomb, no death announcement, no mourning scene. For a woman so central to Egypt's cultural upheaval, her absence is more than strange. It's a black hole in history. So what happened to her? One theory suggests the simplest answer. She died. Childbirth was risky, even for royalty. Nefertiti's second daughter, Meketaten, also disappears from records around this time, possibly indicating a dual tragedy, a mother and daughter lost in the same dark moment. But if that were true, why no elaborate funeral, no tribute, no temple? This was a woman revered like a goddess. A quiet death doesn't fit the script. Others propose something far more political. Perhaps Nefertiti fell from favour. Maybe the tides turned within the royal court. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated, could have sidelined her, possibly in favour of another consort. Some suggest a co-ruler named Smenkhkare, an enigmatic figure who appears briefly in the historical record, may have replaced her. Was this a male heir? A half-brother? Or was Smenkhkare Nefertiti herself, under a new name? That's the most electrifying theory, that Nefertiti didn't disappear at all. She transformed. Evidence suggests someone named Neferneferuaten ruled in the final years of Akhenaten's reign. This individual used feminine grammar in inscriptions and even referenced Akhenaten as her beloved husband. Could this have been Nefertiti, crowned as pharaoh in her own right? If so, she would have joined the rarest ranks in Egyptian history, a female king like Hatshepsut before her. But even this theory dissolves in sand. Neferneferuaten's reign ends abruptly, and then comes a name more familiar. Tutankhaten, later Tutankhamun, a child king who would reverse his parents' reforms and restore the old gods. If Nefertiti did reign alone, it was short. And if she was Smenkhkare or Neferneferuaten, she ruled as a ghost queen, visible only in hints, half-carved cartouches, and broken relics, a puzzle missing its centerpiece. And so, just as suddenly as she arrived, the most powerful woman in Egypt disappears. But her legend, that was just beginning to take shape. As the dust of Amarna began to settle, a new figure emerged, a boy king barely old enough to hold a scepter. His name was Tutankhaten, later changed to Tutankhamun, and he would become the most famous pharaoh in the world, not for what he did in life, but for the treasures found in his untouched tomb. But what matters here is this: who was his mother? The historical records are frustratingly silent. His father was almost certainly Akhenaten. But the identity of his mother remains shrouded in confusion. Some scholars argue that Nefertiti was his stepmother. Others speculate she may have been his biological mother, pointing to art and timing that seems to place him as a young child during her final public appearances. If Nefertiti truly bore Tutankhamun, it would make sense. His early reign was clearly guided by someone with a steady hand, and his decisions to reverse his father's religious revolution may not have been entirely his own. And that's where the intrigue deepens. Who was steering the ship during Tutankhamun's fragile reign? The boy king was only about 9 when he took the throne. A child can't restore a religious empire alone. Someone was behind the scenes. Someone experienced in court politics, religion, and public symbolism. Could it have been Nefertiti, ruling from the shadows? Or was it the high priest Ai, her possible father? Or perhaps both, working together to erase the chaos of Amarna and return Egypt to its old gods? One of the more compelling pieces of evidence comes from a golden shrine found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It shows a woman anointing the young king, a woman with features eerily similar to Nefertiti. If that was her, it means she may not have vanished at all, but stayed at the heart of power in a more discreet form. Still, without a named tomb, without a confirmed mummy, we are left with only fragments. If she did guide Tutankhamun, her fingerprints are everywhere, but her name is gone, scrubbed from temples, left out of king lists, as though someone tried to erase the memory of a woman who once ruled like a god. And yet, the irony is rich. Tutankhamun's fame would resurrect her image, because in searching for his story, the world stumbled upon hers. For someone who stood at the center of Egypt's most radical era, queen, priestess, possible pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed tomb. Not a single monument bears her death rites, no sarcophagus, no funerary mask, no inscription whispering her final words to the gods. It's as though she evaporated. This absence has haunted Egyptologists for over a century. In a culture obsessed with the afterlife, where every noble was embalmed, mummified, and buried with instructions for the soul's journey, how could one of the most powerful women in Egyptian history be lost? Theories abound. One possibility is that she was buried hastily and without ceremony in the waning years of the Amarna period. Perhaps her radical legacy made her dangerous in the eyes of the new regime. Her tomb may have been dismantled, her name defaced, part of the sweeping effort to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy. After all, the return to traditional gods was swift, and vengeance in stone-cut hieroglyphs was common. Another, more tantalizing theory suggests her tomb was never truly lost. It was simply misidentified or still hidden. Some researchers propose that she lies within the Valley of the Kings itself, concealed behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. In 2015, radar scans of KV-62, the famed tomb of King Tut, indicated possible hidden chambers. Was Nefertiti buried just inches away, sealed off and forgotten beneath layers of history and gold? That idea captured the world's imagination. A queen sleeping just beyond reach. Egyptologists held their breath, but further scans yielded inconclusive results. Excavations slowed, funding dried up, and once again Nefertiti retreated into myth. Yet her absence is loud. We have her images, dozens, perhaps hundreds, her likeness captured in stone and pigment. Her bust, now in Berlin, still gazes with unfathomable grace across museum glass, as if she knows something we don't, as if she's waiting. Every year, new digs continue in Amarna and the valley. Every year, whispers stir. Could a sealed chamber finally give up her secrets? Could a cartouche in forgotten sand spell her true name? Or is she destined to remain the eternal riddle, an unfinished sentence in the story of Egypt? If history buried her, it didn't succeed for long, because the search for Nefertiti never truly stopped. It only deepened. If her tomb was never found, and her body never identified, why do we still remember Nefertiti? The answer sits behind museum glass, beneath soft lights in Berlin's Neues Museum. A painted limestone sculpture that has captivated the world since its rediscovery in 1912. The bust of Nefertiti. She gazes forward with poise and serenity, her long neck graceful, her blue crown distinct, and her features so refined they almost feel modern. One eye is unfinished, perhaps left that way intentionally, or perhaps a forgotten detail during the workshop's final days. Yet, even incomplete, she is timeless, unforgettable. The bust was discovered by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt in the ruins of the sculptor Thutmose's studio at Amarna. When he brushed away the dust and revealed her face, he knew instantly what he had found. In his diary he wrote, "No use describing it, you have to see it." And once the world did, Nefertiti became not just a historical figure, but a global symbol of beauty, of power, of ancient enigma. But even her bust is not without controversy. Germany acquired the artifact during a time of loose antiquities laws, and Egypt has been requesting its return for decades. To the Egyptians, she belongs home, in the land whose sun once touched her skin, where she stood beneath Aten's rays. But Germany has refused. They claim her fragility makes her unsafe to travel. Others say it's about prestige. Nefertiti brings in crowds. She is, after all, their Mona Lisa. Still, her presence, wherever she may be, has changed how the world sees ancient women. She wasn't just a passive beauty. Her bust captures something regal, assertive, almost challenging. She looks like someone who held secrets, made decisions, changed the course of empires. And she did. It's remarkable how a single sculpture, delicate and silent, can resurrect someone lost to time. We may never find her tomb. We may never know how she died. But through this bust, Nefertiti achieved something extraordinary. She became immortal not in gold, but in human memory. The face may be still, but the story it tells, that continues to speak, louder than ever, across the centuries. Nefertiti's story lives somewhere between stone and silence, between what we know and what we want to believe. Few figures in ancient history have inspired such relentless fascination and such profound mystery. She is a paradox, one of the most documented women of her time, and yet still largely unknowable. Over the centuries, she's been imagined as many things. To some, she was a goddess in human form, the living embodiment of divine beauty. To others, she was a political mastermind, the force behind the throne, perhaps even the throne itself. Some have portrayed her as a romantic figure, tragically lost in the sands of revolution. Others paint her as ambitious, even ruthless, navigating a collapsing empire with elegance and calculation. But what do we truly know? We know she was more than a royal wife. Her imagery rivals that of kings. Her presence during religious rites, royal ceremonies, and even scenes of battle reveals a woman not just beside power, but wielding it. In a patriarchal world, she carved out her own space, not through rebellion, but through presence, through poise, through sheer command of the visual and spiritual language of her time. We know she was central to one of history's boldest religious shifts. While Akhenaten may have envisioned the monotheistic sun cult, it was Nefertiti who embodied it. She was the human face of a divine ideal, the bridge between the Aten above and the people below. She didn't just serve the gods. She was their image. And we know that after her disappearance, her memory was nearly erased. The backlash against Akhenaten's regime swept her name into oblivion. Her statues were smashed. Her inscriptions were defaced. Her role in history intentionally buried. Yet here we are, 3,000 years later, still whispering her name. Why? Because myth has a way of surviving where facts cannot. Because when a woman becomes both an icon and an enigma, she slips into a space where time can't reach her. Because sometimes the questions echo louder than the answers. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how Nefertiti wanted it. To be remembered, not explained. To be admired, not contained. To live forever, not as a woman of one tomb, but as a queen of endless speculation. More than 3 millennia have passed since Nefertiti last walked beneath Egypt's sun, yet her shadow still stretches across our world, etched in museum glass, whispered through academic halls, splashed across the pages of novels and screens of documentaries. Unlike most historical figures, she hasn't faded into the past. If anything, she grows larger with time. There's something irresistible about her, not just the beauty. We've seen beauty before. It's the mystery. The deliberate blank spaces in her biography feel like a challenge, a taunt, as if she's daring us to try and understand her, knowing full well we never truly will. And in that way, she's become something more than historical. She's become archetypal. Every generation reinterprets Nefertiti in its own image. In the early 20th century, she was an exotic queen, mysterious and submissive. In the feminist wave, she became a symbol of female power, an ancient ruler lost to patriarchal erasure. In modern media, she's a style icon, an African queen, a political player, even a possible pharaoh. She has lived 1,000 second lives, not through facts, but through imagination. But maybe that's the most fitting afterlife of all. In ancient Egypt, immortality wasn't just about mummification, it was about memory. If your name was spoken, your image seen, your story retold, you lived on. You could travel the field of reeds, dine with the gods, exist beyond death. Nefertiti, whether by design or by chance, has achieved that. Her name is spoken across continents. Her face is one of the most recognized in human history. Her story, though fractured, still commands attention. So in a way, her greatest legacy wasn't carved into a tomb or sealed beneath desert stone. It was this: enduring curiosity. She left behind a perfect mystery, a life half seen, half erased, and wholly unforgettable. And perhaps that was her final act of power. Not just to rule an empire, not just to shape religion or raise royal daughters, but to become timeless. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who has come, never truly left. She remains here, in our questions, our wonder, and our need to remember the women history tried to forget. She lives not in gold or glory, but in the eternal act of being searched for. And what is more immortal than that? China, where the clouds hang low and the wind hums through bamboo groves, a dragon lies coiled. But it is no myth, no fire-breathing beast of legend. This dragon is made of earth and stone, carved by centuries of calloused hands and patient vision. It is the Longji rice terraces, known to locals as the dragon's backbone, and its curves ripple across the mountainside like scales, shimmering with water, rice, and ancient pride. From a distance, the terraces resemble a sleeping creature. Hills ripple with rhythmic precision, each layer rising and falling like the sinew of a living form. But step closer, and you'll find something even more alive. Water flows in soft whispers along carefully dug channels. Seedlings flutter in the breeze, and at dawn, the morning mist drapes the landscape like breath rising from the dragon's nostrils. These terraces weren't built in haste. Their story began over 700 years ago, when the Zhuang and Yao people, ethnic minorities with deep ties to the mountains, chose to tame the slopes rather than abandon them. Flat land was scarce. Machinery was non-existent. And so they looked to the mountain and asked a simple question: how do we feed ourselves here? The answer took generations. Armed with little more than stone tools and bamboo baskets, they carved the hills inch by inch, year by year. With each level built, they not only shaped the land, they taught it to breathe with them. Rainfall became resource, slope became sustenance. Rice, the staple of life, began to grow where gravity once ruled, and over time, the terraces began to resemble a dragon in repose, strong, eternal, sacred. This was more than agriculture. It was harmony, a silent pact between humans and nature. No part of the mountain was wasted, and no part was forced to bend violently. Instead, the people worked with the earth, shaping it in curves and swells, listening to the wind, following the water. Today, the dragon's backbone still feeds entire villages. But more than that, it reminds us what patience can build. In a world racing forward, here lies a dragon that was never chased, only carved, layer by layer, dream by dream. To walk among the Longji rice terraces is to step into a world carved by persistence. There is no illusion here, no machine tracks, no corporate survey markers. What stretches across these mountains are the fingerprints of human endurance. Every curve, every slope, every drop of water has been arranged, stone by stone, with hands that knew the pulse of the land. Centuries ago, when the Zhuang and Yao peoples first looked upon these steep and unforgiving hillsides, they did not see obstacles. They saw opportunity. The lowlands were already taken, the fertile valleys already sown. But up here, amid the rugged peaks, there was possibility, if only they could make the earth listen. With no heavy tools they began. Wooden shovels, stone hoes, baskets of mud and rubble carried on backs worn by time. Slowly, terraces began to form, horizontal veins across the mountain, held in place by hand-stacked stone walls. These weren't accidental cuts into the slope. They were calculated. Each level had to be perfectly balanced, not only to hold water, but to carry it from one tier to the next without waste. One miscalculation could cause an entire section to collapse. Too steep and the water would rush, too flat and it would stagnate. So they measured not with rulers, but with generations of intuition. Children learned from their elders. Elders watched the seasons, and the mountain, in time, gave in, not with surrender, but with trust. And the result? A landscape that defies nature by flowing with it. From the valley base to the cloud-kissed peaks, these terraces rise like a spiral staircase to the sky. They mirror the topography with elegance, almost as if the mountain grew them itself. But no, the mountain did not shape these curves. Humans did. With no engines, no concrete, no architectural degrees. Just time, just trial and error, just the belief that land, no matter how steep, can be made to serve life. Today, the terraces remain functional, still farmed, still repaired, still respected. No bulldozers, no shortcuts. The old ways survive not because they resist the future, but because they proved something rare. That tradition, when rooted deep enough, can outlast every storm. If the dragon's backbone is muscle and bone, then water is its blood. It flows quietly, without pumps or engines, tracing ancient channels that slip from mountaintop springs into every terrace below. This hydraulic choreography is no accident. It is the secret life of the terraces, the reason they've endured for centuries. At the top of the mountain, rainwater and natural springs are caught in narrow ditches and earthen canals. From there, gravity becomes the farmer's silent ally. The water descends through terrace after terrace, pooling gently in each field before spilling into the next. This design, fluid, seamless, ensures that every patch of rice receives what it needs. No more, no less. There are no valves, no switches. Control lies in subtle gates made of stone or wood, adjusted by hand and habit. If one terrace overflows, it could flood the next. If one leaks, a drought may follow. And so the villagers, guardians of this delicate system, walk the ridges daily, checking, adjusting, listening to the sound of flow. It's less like farming, more like playing an instrument. One wrong note, and the whole song is off. But the water does more than feed rice. It mirrors the sky. In spring, when the terraces are first flooded, the paddies turn to glass. They reflect the clouds, the sun, even the stars on a clear night. Visitors often describe the sight as surreal, like the mountain has become a living mirror, reflecting both heaven and earth. Then comes summer. The water thickens with stalks of green. The reflection fades, replaced by movement, rippling rice plants swaying in the wind like an emerald sea. In autumn, the water glistens through the gold of ripened grain, and in winter, when farming ceases, snow and frost replace the flowing current. The dragon sleeps, but the channels remain, quiet veins awaiting spring. Time moves differently here, not by hours, but by moisture, by the first trickle of mountain thaw, by the sound of frogs returning, by the scent of wet soil. In a world that measures time in seconds, The people of Longji still measure it in seasons and drops, and so the dragon lives, not in fire and flight, but in ripples of water, pulsing gently through a living masterpiece of stone and soil. Spring in the Longji Mountains begins not with blossoms but with water. As the snow melts in the higher peaks, streams trickle downward, breathing life into the waiting terraces. The mirror-like paddies are ready. The dragon stirs, and the people prepare for the ritual that ties them to every generation before them, planting the first seed. There is no grand announcement, only quiet movement. Farmers, young and old, rise with the mist. They walk barefoot along the narrow ridges, straw hats low over their eyes, baskets balanced on their backs. The air is thick with the scent of soaked soil and mountain wind. The paddies, flooded just days earlier, now shimmer like polished jade. This is not a task for machines. It never has been. Each rice seedling, grown in nursery beds, is transplanted by hand, one by one, line by line. The workers step into the cold water and press the tender stalks into the mud with gentle fingers. It's a rhythm that feels almost sacred. Back bent, arm out, hand press, repeat. All day, sometimes for weeks. Children follow, splashing in the shallows, mimicking their elders. They learn not from textbooks, but by standing in the water, feeling the resistance of mud, learning the spacing by eye. It's how knowledge survives here, lived, not spoken. Planting is more than labour. It is ceremony. Offerings are made to the mountain spirits. Songs are sung. In some villages, elders scatter the first handful of seedlings as a blessing. Every field planted is a promise, to the land, to the ancestors, to the children, yet to come. The pace is unhurried. No one rushes the dragon. No one races the mountain. Instead, the rhythm of planting becomes a meditation, a slow dance of human and nature, of patience and purpose. And as the days pass, green shoots begin to rise from the watery fields like whispers. From this moment forward, the terraces will grow not just rice, but hope. Each seed is a prayer, each row a quiet defiance against hunger and haste. And so begins the cycle once again, not with noise or fire, but with hands in mud and hearts in the sky. The dragon is awake, the mountain breathes, and the future is planted, one seed at a time. Scattered along the ridgelines and nestled in the crooks of the terraces are the heartbeats of the dragon's backbone. Villages like Ping'an, Dazhai, and Jingkeng. These are not just settlements. They are living museums of heritage, where every home, path, and balcony clings to the mountain like a memory that refuses to fade. The houses are built of timber, resting on stilts to protect them from the rains and the steepness of the slope. Their rooftops, dark and slanted, mirror the lines of the terraces they overlook. From above, they seem like wooden lanterns floating on waves of green. Inside, life is simple, warm, and deeply communal. Generations share a home. Meals are cooked over wood fires. The smell of rice wine and bamboo smoke drifts into the mountain air. The people here belong to ethnic minorities, the Zhuang and the Red Yao, each with their own language, customs and stories. You'll recognize the Yao women instantly. Their long black hair, uncut since childhood, is coiled into elegant shapes atop their heads. Some let it fall like silk waterfalls when they bathe in the river, a scene so graceful it borders on myth. Despite modernization creeping up the mountain trails, traditions hold strong. Hand-woven clothes dyed in indigo, wooden looms creaking in quiet rooms, music played on reed pipes and bronze drums during village festivals. Weddings still involve ritual dances. The harvest is still welcomed with song. Hospitality is not a transaction here, it's a reflex. Guests are offered tea brewed from local leaves, rice wine in carved gourds, and stories passed down from elders who remember the mountain before electricity arrived. They speak of dragons in the mist, of ancestors who first carved the hills, of spirits who still guard the fields. And though tourism now brings visitors from every corner of the world, The rhythm of village life continues, largely undisturbed. The rice still grows. The rituals still mark the seasons. The terraces, like the people, endure, not by resisting change, but by absorbing it slowly, carefully, like water descending one level at a time. Here, within the dragon's coils, life is not rushed. It flows, it echoes, it remembers. To walk the terraces of Longji is to walk through layers of myth. The hills are not just soil and stone. They're alive with stories whispered through bamboo groves and carried on the wind. For the villagers, these mountains are not merely land. They are sacred beings, shaped by gods, guarded by spirits, and inhabited by tales passed from one generation to the next. The most enduring legend speaks of a sleeping dragon whose body stretches across the ridges. Its spine rises in coils, the very terraces themselves. Locals believe that the curves of the mountain are not man-made, but rather the dragon's scales, rising and falling with breath. When mist rolls in from the valley and covers the paddies in white, it's said the dragon stirs, breathing gently in its sleep. Another tale tells of how the terraces were born from divine generosity. In a time of famine, the ancestors climbed the mountains and prayed to the heavens. Moved by their devotion, the gods sent rain and instructed them to carve the hills into steps so rice could grow. The people obeyed, and the dragon appeared to guide their hands. Ever since, they have honoured the mountain with respect, never shouting in the fields, never cutting trees without prayer. These beliefs are not written in books. They live in songs sung during the planting, in incense burned before a new growing season, in the silence kept during misty mornings. Children grow up hearing these tales not as fantasy, but as truth embedded in the land. To laugh at the dragon is to risk bad harvest. To disrespect the spirits is to invite flood or drought. There are spirits in the water too. Some farmers still make offerings before releasing the spring water into the terraces for the first time each year. A few drops of rice wine, a prayer murmured under breath. Not for show, just tradition, as natural as tying a shoe. And whether you believe in dragons or not, something sacred hangs in the air. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's the clouds, or maybe it's the quiet certainty that this place is more than human work. It's a story, still being told, written not in ink, but in stone, water, and rice. For centuries, the dragon's backbone was a secret kept by the mountains, remote, quiet, and known only to those who called it home. But no place, no matter how sacred, remains untouched forever. The road came, the wires followed. Tourists, cameras, and smartphones climbed the hills alongside the farmers. And the terraces, ancient and weathered, faced a question they'd never had to answer before. How do you survive the modern world? At first, there was worry. Some feared the mountain would be sold piece by piece to developers. That concrete would replace wood. That culture would become costume. But the people of Longji didn't just endure. They adapted. Not by abandoning the past, but by weaving the present into it, one careful thread at a time. Villagers began opening their homes to guests, not as resorts, but as family stays. Visitors eat local meals, sticky rice steamed in bamboo, wild greens picked that morning. They sleep in wooden stilt houses, where roosters still announce the sunrise. The experience isn't curated for show, it's lived, honest, real. And the farming. It continues. Each season, locals still flood the terraces, still plant by hand, still harvest with sickles worn smooth by time. Children attend school by day, but help in the fields at dusk. Tourism may bring income, but rice brings life. One supports the other. Both are essential. Some young villagers have left for the cities, but many return. There is something magnetic about the terraces, something deeper than nostalgia. It's the sound of water sliding through the channels, the way the stars reflect in the paddies, the way the mountains teach patience. Local festivals have grown louder, yes. There are now microphones where there were once drums, Signs in Mandarin and English stand beside sacred springs. But the rituals still happen. Offerings are still made. Elders still lead the songs. The dragon's backbone didn't resist change. It absorbed it, with grace, with balance. The terraces remain not because they are frozen in time, but because they breathe with time, flexing, adjusting, but never breaking. In an age where tradition is often sacrificed for progress, Longji stands as quiet proof that progress can walk gently, if it chooses, that the old ways still have room in the modern world, especially when they are this beautiful. The dragon's backbone is never the same place twice. With each season, it sheds its skin, transforms its colours, shifts its mood. While cities change in years, the terraces change in weeks, draped not just in light, but in rhythm. To stand among them through a full year is to witness a mountain breathe. Spring arrives like a mirror. The terraces are flooded in preparation for planting, and the still water reflects the sky like silver glass. Clouds drift not just above, but below your feet. Visitors speak of walking through heaven. The fields look empty, but they're full of potential. Beneath the surface, life is stirring. Summer brings a burst of green. The rice shoots stretch tall and straight, blanketing the hills in an emerald cascade. From a distance, the terraces look like ribbons of velvet, rolling in every direction. The air is warm and wet. Frogs call from the paddies. Farmers, knee-deep in water, work from dawn till dusk, their hats bobbing like tiny sails on a jade sea. Autumn is gold. Harvest time. The rice matures, and the terraces catch fire in the sunlight, glowing with grain. The fields ripple in the wind and drums echo through the villages. Families gather. Songs are sung. Sticky rice is cooked. It's not just a season, it's a celebration. The dragon, fully awake, offers its bounty. Winter draws the mountain into stillness. The terrace is empty, the water drains. Snow sometimes falls, dusting the steps in soft white. Other times, frost clings to the walls like lace. There are no tools in the field, no voices, only silence. The dragon sleeps, resting, waiting. Each season writes a different poem. Spring reflects, summer grows, autumn feeds, winter rests. The beauty of Longji isn't just in its shape, but in its cycle, in how it accepts time without resistance, in how it transforms quietly, never needing to announce itself. Photographers chase the light here, hoping to capture something eternal, but the terraces don't freeze for anyone. They move, they breathe, they teach us, softly, that beauty is not static, it's a rhythm, a practice, a promise renewed with every season. And so the dragon turns again, not with roar or flame, but with water, grain, and wind. In the end, the terraces are more than fields. They are a vow, quiet, curved, and carved into the mountainside. A promise passed down from hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. The dragon's backbone is not just a wonder of agriculture or a masterpiece of engineering. It is the story of what happens when humans choose to live with the land, not against it. There were easier paths. The ancestors of Longji could have moved to valleys, chased flatter ground. But they stayed. They studied the slope, listened to the stone, followed the water. And in doing so, they made the impossible ordinary, feeding villages on a mountainside. Every curve holds a lesson, not just about rice, but about patience, about legacy, about care. These terraces weren't built in years, or even decades. They took centuries. There is no shortcut to harmony, no machine that can replicate the knowledge etched into each stone wall by calloused hands and quiet persistence. And yet nothing about them is frozen. The terraces are alive. They evolve. They bend with the weather, with the needs of the people, with the shape of the world. That's their secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. Even now, as the modern world climbs the hills with its signals and screens, the terraces remain grounded. They change. but they do not vanish, because their roots are not just in soil. They are in story, in ritual, in the simple, enduring act of planting a seed and trusting the sky. To walk the dragon's backbone is to witness a contract between humans and the earth, a contract signed with sweat and sun, renewed with every harvest. It's a reminder that progress does not always mean speed, and that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it murmurs, like a stream slipping over stone. And perhaps that is why the terraces speak to so many, from farmers to travellers to dreamers, because they represent what we've nearly forgotten. That the most lasting things in this world are not built with force, but with rhythm, humility, and time. The dragon sleeps, the people endure, and the mountain remembers. Most visitors to Giza lift their eyes to the sky, drawn to the towering silhouettes of the pyramids and the gaze of the great Sphinx. But few ask what lies beneath, under the sand, under the Nile, under centuries of forgotten currents. For in the quiet shallows near the ancient village of Abu Rawash, just a short distance from the Giza plateau, a strange tale stirs. It speaks of something enormous, eroded and ignored, an underwater sphinx. Local fishermen have whispered of it for generations, a smooth-backed shape that seems too symmetrical to be natural, a feline form, half buried in mud and waterlogged sediment. When the Nile's waters recede during droughts, parts of it emerge. Stone curves, grooves, and what some say is a carved paw, impossibly worn but unmistakably shaped by hands. It doesn't sit among the tourist routes. There are no guideposts, no velvet ropes, no tour buses idling nearby. Just an area thick with reeds, brackish water, and silence. Explorers who've ventured there claim the land itself feels different, charged, as if memory clings to it. Beneath the murk, sonar scans have picked up geometric patterns and what appear to be blocks placed with intent. But what truly startles are the claims that this figure, a sphinx-like formation submerged near Giza, may predate the pyramids entirely. Not by decades, but by millennia. If true, it would shatter the established chronology of Egyptian civilization. The mainstream timeline anchors the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE, but this underwater form, if genuinely carved, could belong to an age when the Sahara was still green and the Nile ran wild through a wetter, lusher land. Skeptics, of course, dismiss it as a misidentified rock formation, limestone shaped by water and wishful thinking, but the grooves, the curves, the alignment with celestial markers, it all invites more questions than answers. The site remains unexcavated. Official archaeologists have largely ignored it. Perhaps it's nothing. Perhaps it's everything, a relic not just of Egypt's past, but of a world lost to flood and time. For now, the so-called underwater Sphinx lies quiet, not sleeping, waiting, and if it could speak, one wonders what secrets it would tell, and why so many seem determined not to listen. The legend of the underwater Sphinx moved from whispered folklore to global curiosity in the 1980s. That's when a few independent researchers and divers began publishing strange reports, accounts of a massive lion-bodied figure partially submerged near the Giza plateau. Early photographs were grainy, inconclusive, and often dismissed. But they sparked something that couldn't be put back in the bottle: curiosity, and more dangerously, doubt. One of the most vocal early proponents was an amateur Egyptologist who claimed to have seen a weathered monument deep beneath silt and flood layers during a brief drought window. According to him, the figure wasn't an isolated rock or erosion trick. It had geometry, legs, symmetry, even the faint suggestion of a carved face. Naturally, this challenged the traditional narrative. Egyptology, as a discipline, rests on structure and established timelines. Most scholars place the construction of the Giza pyramids and the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafra. The suggestion of another Sphinx, older and partially submerged, would require rethinking not just Egyptian history, but the timeline of human civilization itself. Mainstream academics responded with caution, even disdain. Without peer-reviewed excavation, carbon dating, or stratigraphic studies, the claim couldn't be taken seriously. Many argued the so-called underwater Sphinx was likely a natural formation, limestone weathered by thousands of years of Nile flooding and sediment erosion. In Egypt, they pointed out, nature often mimics the intentional. Wind, water, and time are capable sculptors, but the photos kept circulating. The sonar readings continued to show odd patterns, too regular, too smooth, too suggestive. And then came the theorists. Authors, filmmakers, and fringe historians began building stories around the mystery. That the Sphinx was a relic of a forgotten civilization, perhaps Atlantean, perhaps pre-dynastic Egyptian, lost in a flood that scoured the Sahara. They pointed to water erosion patterns on the original Great Sphinx, argued for lost technologies, and hinted that what lay beneath the Nile might be far older than accepted memory allows. The debate grew louder, but the ground remained still. No official dig was launched, no museum claimed it, and the Sphinx, if that's what it is, remained right where it always had been, buried in silt, caught between myth and mud. The idea that something near Giza might predate the pyramids isn't just provocative, it's revolutionary. If the underwater Sphinx is more than erosion or coincidence, then Egypt's story didn't begin in the 4th dynasty. It began before it, deep in prehistory, when the Sahara was a green savanna and the Nile roamed wider, wilder, and less predictable. This possibility gained traction in the 1990s when geologist Dr. Robert Schoch studied the Great Sphinx itself. He argued that the deep vertical weathering on the Sphinx's enclosure wasn't caused by wind and sand, but by rainfall, heavy, sustained, ancient rainfall, which hadn't touched the Giza Plateau since at least 7000 BCE. That pushed the possible date of the Sphinx back by thousands of years, well before the first pharaohs carved names into stone. If water shaped the original Sphinx, could water also have hidden an even older sibling? The so-called underwater Sphinx sits in a lower region near ancient floodplains. Some satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar suggest possible foundations, rectangular outlines, and deliberate shaping, all buried beneath silt and seasonal water. These signs hint that the site may not just be older than the Sphinx. It may come from a time when nothing in Egypt was yet carved in hieroglyphs. Supporters of the theory point to Egypt's missing chapters, the gap between the end of the Ice Age and the rise of the first dynasties. During this time, the Nile shifted courses, the Sahara transitioned from wet grasslands to dry desert, and civilizations may have risen and fallen, undocumented and erased. The idea that an ancient people, pre-literate, pre-pharaonic, could have shaped a monument of this scale seems implausible to traditional historians. But is it? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey was built around 9600 BCE by hunter-gatherers. It features megalithic pillars with carved animals, predating Stonehenge by thousands of years. Could Egypt hold a similar secret? An ancient culture that marked the land with stone long before papyrus carried their stories? If the underwater Sphinx was built in such a time, it would change everything we know about human history. It would suggest not just forgotten ruins, but a forgotten age, one that may have whispered to the builders of Giza, leaving behind more than myth, perhaps a monument drowned, then forgotten. Stone doesn't lie, it remembers, and around the site of the so-called underwater Sphinx, it tells a quiet but persistent story, not just of time, but of water. Sediment layers, erosion marks, and flood patterns hint at a history long before the desert became dry, long before the Nile settled into its familiar course, long before the pharaohs carved their names into history. Geologists who have examined photographs and data from the site near Abu Rawash note peculiar erosion marks, smooth, rounded grooves that suggest prolonged exposure to flowing water. Not wind, not sand, but rainfall and movement, forces absent from this region for thousands of years. Similar arguments have been made about the Great Sphinx itself, especially its enclosure wall. Critics of the standard timeline point out that the deep vertical fissures seen on the Sphinx's surrounding trench don't resemble wind erosion at all. They mimic rainfall, heavy, sustained prehistoric rain. Now, at the possible underwater Sphinx site, we see the same signature, only this time hidden beneath a shallow flood basin. During periods of low Nile flow or excavation, parts of the structure are said to rise into view, lion-like haunches, shoulders, and a foundation that seems too level to be natural. Researchers who have surveyed the area note that the basin is geologically active, with high clay content and evidence of ancient water tables fluctuating violently. The stone there is heavily worn, but not randomly. The wear follows the shape of the structure itself, flowing in lines that suggest deliberate carving, then drowning. Some sediment layers around the site date back to the early Holocene, when Egypt was wetter, greener, and prone to massive flooding. If a monument had been carved then, it could have stood for centuries before being swallowed by mud, forgotten by shifting populations, and buried under the Nile's wandering silt. Skeptics argue this is all coincidence, natural formations teased into myth by hopeful eyes. But water doesn't form symmetry. It doesn't carve pores. It doesn't create aligned foundations or echo the geometry of a known sphinx just a few miles away. So the question deepens. If water erased this monument from view, what else has it taken with it? And more urgently, how much of history still lies hidden beneath the surface? If the underwater sphinx is truly there, silent, carved, and ancient, why hasn't it been excavated? Why does it remain beneath layers of mud and silence, passed over by archaeologists, ignored by governments, and left to the currents? The answer, like the artifact itself, lies beneath the surface. Egypt's archaeological institutions are protective, rightfully so. The nation guards its ancient heritage with rigid protocols, strict excavation rules, and an insistence on academic consensus. Digging up any site, especially one that challenges the traditional timeline, requires permits, funding, international oversight, and, most importantly, institutional approval. And that approval often rests on one unspoken rule: do not rewrite Egypt's history without a mountain of undeniable evidence. And that's the problem. The so-called underwater Sphinx has never received an official, state-sponsored excavation. Independent researchers, foreign academics, and fringe theorists have studied the area, but without formal backing, their findings remain anecdotal, suggestive, but not conclusive. There's also the issue of the Nile itself. The river is not a static feature. It floods, recedes, and shifts over decades. The site where the monument allegedly rests is flood-prone, often submerged for much of the year. Excavation would require draining the area, rerouting water, protecting nearby ecosystems, and managing structural damage caused by centuries of sediment pressure. That alone would take years, if not decades. Then there are political factors. A discovery of this magnitude, if validated, would disrupt more than academic timelines. It could challenge established narratives, upset national pride, and attract a media frenzy Egypt might not be eager to welcome. The Ministry of Antiquities prefers to promote discoveries that reinforce Egypt's grandeur, not question its foundational history. Some whisper that certain institutions may already know more than they reveal, that preliminary studies have been done quietly, behind closed doors. But without public records, peer-reviewed findings, or government announcements, these claims drift into conspiracy. And so, the monument remains buried. Whether by accident or design, it sleeps under mud and skepticism. It is a strange irony that in a land obsessed with preserving its ancient past, one of its greatest mysteries may be hidden in plain sight, unclaimed, unstudied, and untouched by time's official record. But nothing stays buried forever. To the ancient Egyptians, the Sphinx was more than a sculpture. It was a symbol, part guardian, part god, part mystery. With the body of a lion and the head of a man, The Sphinx represented strength fused with wisdom, physical power tamed by royal mind. It was a cosmic sentinel, placed at thresholds where the divine met the mortal. The most famous, of course, is the Great Sphinx of Giza. Towering 66 feet high, it has guarded the plateau for over 4,000 years, facing the rising sun, watching over the tombs of pharaohs. Its exact origin is still debated. Some say it was built by Khafra. Others argue it may be far older, its face recarved over time. So what would it mean if a second Sphinx, hidden, water-worn and possibly older, exists just miles away? It would change everything. No known records speak of twin sphinxes at Giza. Ancient texts are silent. But in later Greco-Roman tradition, there are mentions of guardians positioned in balance, flanking sacred spaces. In Egyptian architecture, symmetry is sacred. Temples often have twin statues, twin obelisks, twin avenues of lions. Why not twin sphinxes? Some researchers argue that the so-called underwater sphinx might not be a copy, but the original. A prototype. A pre-dynastic version later replicated on a grander scale. If true, it suggests that the idea of the Sphinx came not from dynastic builders, but from a forgotten culture whose myths were carried forward, adopted, and refined. And if the monument predates writing, it may not be bound by the pharaoh's ideology at all. Its purpose could have been astronomical, ritualistic, or even commemorative, marking an event, a flood, or a forgotten god. The lion shape itself is no accident. In ancient Egypt, lions represented the horizon, the gate of dawn and dusk. A sphinx facing east watches the rebirth of the sun, eternally. To carve one was to freeze that sacred act in stone. Now imagine one carved before the pyramids. Aligned, guarding, waiting. It would not just rewrite history, it would redefine the mythos of Egypt itself, not as the beginning of civilization, but as the last echo of something even older. And the fact that this symbol might be sleeping beneath water, all the more fitting for a guardian of lost worlds. As whispers of the underwater sphinx echo further across the world, a quiet divide has opened, one that runs deeper than sediment or stone. On one side stands traditional Egyptology, cautious, structured, and rooted in academic consensus. On the other, a growing community of independent researchers, alternative historians, and curious minds who believe something extraordinary is being overlooked. Mainstream scholars insist on evidence, peer-reviewed studies, stratigraphy, inscriptions, and radiocarbon dates. Their concern is not unwarranted. Egypt is filled with natural rock formations that resemble human or animal shapes, and misidentifying them can lead to misinformation. Archaeology, after all, must be careful. The past is fragile. It cannot be rebuilt once broken by careless hands or media hype. But to others, caution has become complacency. Independent investigators, many of them trained scientists or engineers from outside the field, argue that the underwater sphinx and similar anomalies deserve deeper study. They point to high-resolution satellite images that show unnatural symmetry, to LiDAR scans that detect rectangular foundations beneath layers of mud, to erosion patterns that seem shaped not by chaos, but by design. They also question the political motivations behind silence. Tourism dollars flow through well-trodden monuments. A new sphinx, especially one that threatens the accepted timeline, could disrupt Egypt's narrative and authority. The fear, they suggest, is not of fraud, but of rewriting everything. Books, documentaries, podcasts, and conferences now regularly feature the underwater sphinx. It has become a symbol of hidden history, used as both rallying cry and cautionary tale. Supporters call for open excavation. Detractors warn against pseudoscience. The truth, as always, is lost in the middle, buried beneath voices as thick as the Nile's silt. The divide isn't just academic, it's emotional. It speaks to how we approach the past. Do we trust only what has been confirmed? Or do we follow the hints left just beyond reach? The underwater sphinx forces that question into the open. It's not just a rock or a relic, it's a litmus test for how curious we're allowed to be. And as long as it remains unearthed, both sides will continue to argue, above a monument that says nothing, yet might change everything. There's something haunting about a mystery buried in plain sight, especially when it wears the face of a lion and stares up from the mud with ancient silence. The so-called underwater sphinx near Giza may or may not be real, but its pull is undeniable. It stirs something in us, a yearning not just to discover, but to remember. Because deep down, the story of a forgotten monument taps into something older than archaeology, the human sense of loss. We've always lived beside ruins. Cities fall, languages die, civilizations vanish beneath waves, sand and ash. We look to the past not just for answers, but for identity. Who were we? How far back do our stories stretch? And what have we forgotten in our rush toward progress? If the underwater sphinx is real, if it was carved by hands before recorded history, it becomes more than a relic. It becomes a voice from a chapter we didn't know existed. A marker from an age when people may have understood the stars differently, honoured the earth more intimately, or carried a mythology we can only guess at. Some believe it belongs to an advanced prehistoric culture lost to global catastrophe, a theory often dismissed as fringe. But whether or not that's true, the emotional gravity remains. To imagine a monument carved long before the pyramids, submerged by rising waters, and then erased, is to confront how fragile civilization truly is. And perhaps that's why the story persists. It reminds us that time is not linear, that empires are temporary, that even stone can disappear if the river flows long enough. But more importantly, it reminds us that discovery isn't over, that Earth still holds secrets not written in textbooks. In an era defined by instant answers and global data, the underwater sphinx is a rare thing, an unanswered question, a possibility, a mystery not yet solved by drones or algorithms. And whether it proves to be natural rock or a forgotten monument, it already holds value, because it makes us wonder. Wonder if the past is deeper than we thought. Wonder if myth holds memory. Wonder what lies just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen. The underwater sphinx of Giza, whether carved or accidental, confirmed or dismissed, remains where it has always been, beneath the surface, beneath the mud, the water, the weight of time. It has no plaque, no name, no spotlight, and yet it speaks softly in the absence of answers. For every monument we've unearthed in Egypt, there are others still buried, still waiting. Some are too fragile to uncover, others are lost to the shifting Nile, drowned beneath layers of silt and secrecy. And a few, like this one, sit in plain view, ignored not because they lack importance, but because they ask questions we're not yet ready to answer. Maybe that's what makes the underwater sphinx so powerful. Not its size, not its age, but its silence. It forces us to confront the limits of what we know and the discomfort of what we might have overlooked. In truth, it may never be excavated. Politics, funding, and tradition form walls taller than any tomb. But that doesn't mean it's irrelevant. Quite the opposite. The monument's very obscurity has turned it into a mirror, reflecting not just what lies buried, but what we choose to remember, and what we choose to forget. It also reminds us that history is not a closed book. It's a living puzzle, scattered across landscapes and shorelines, waiting for a shift in tide, a change in thinking, or a brave question to unsettle the dust. Perhaps one day the water will recede and the full form will rise, pause, face, and all. Perhaps radar will confirm what myth has long suspected, or perhaps the mystery will remain, passed from generation to generation, like a whisper between stones. But whether monument or mirage, the underwater sphinx already serves its greatest purpose. It stirs the imagination, and in a world drowning in certainty, that may be its greatest gift. Because maybe the most ancient things aren't just buried in sand or time. Maybe they're buried in us, in our need to explore, to remember, and to believe that somewhere out there, beneath waves or desert, the past still breathes and still waits to be found.